Good evening. This is Josh of Severe Weather. I'm a meteorologist in the Raleigh area, and I appreciate you guys joining me this evening. Well, we now have Tropical Storm Helene, and hurricane warnings have now been posted for portions of the Florida Gulf Coast, as well as northeastern parts of the Yucatan Peninsula. And we continue to expect Helene to grow in size and intensity perhaps rapidly over the next couple of days as it marches north and northeastward towards the Panhandle and Big Bend regions of Florida. I'm going to talk about what we're going to expect from this storm and some of the dangers and things we need to be watching for. One thing is for certain, no matter how strong the storm ends up when it hits, Helene is expected to grow in size in a very favorable area of what we call divergence aloft, where air can spread and storms can grow pretty significantly. And the expectation is that no matter how strong Helene is, the official forecast for a Category 3, I personally think it could be stronger, Category 4 at this point. It is going to be a larger system, stretching about 400 miles across in size, impacting a lot of folks. Much of the state of Florida will be impacted by this storm. Georgia, parts of the southeast, even up into the Ohio Valley are going to have some significant impacts from this storm system. This is a look at the current Hurricane Center outlook. And we have water temperatures on the map with it, showing that Helene is a moderate tropical storm right now, expected to move northwest towards the tip of the Yucatan and then make a turn to the north and northeast and speed up in forward motion as we get into Thursday and Thursday evening, with landfall near the Big Bend area as a major hurricane sometime early Thursday night. We do have another area to watch that could become our next tropical depression, but I'm not super concerned about that right now. It should stay over open waters, and the remains of what was Major Hurricane John, that was another one that very quickly intensified, moved slowly inland, and now has diminished into a major rainstorm for southern Mexico. We do have hurricane warnings now. These are in red across the northeastern Yucatan, as there's been a bit of a westward shift in the short-term forecast here, and this is going to be a very critical part of our forecast because if the storm does in fact move over the Yucatan, it is going to slow down the intensification rate. However, there's still a very decent chance that this somehow scrapes the coast or even remains just offshore and gets to feed on the warmest waters of the Atlantic Basin. That's over the Yucatan Channel and southeastern Gulf. And if that happens, then this forecast is going to have to become more intense as the system moves into the northern and eastern Gulf of Mexico, eastern and northern Gulf. We've got a lot of Florida that are in the colors, unfortunately. Big Bend area in particular now under a hurricane warning. We have a hurricane watch that expands into southern Georgia now and into inland areas of the Florida Peninsula. Tropical storm watch for the rest of southeastern Georgia, northeastern Florida, all the way down into southwest Florida, even all the way down on the East Coast. We have a tropical storm watch down to places like Port St. Lucie, including Lake Okeechobee. And tropical storm warnings, hurricane watches for the Bay Area, tropical storm warnings as well for much of the Florida Keys and southwest and central Florida, including the Orlando area. So a massive area is going to have impact from the storm, no matter where exactly it tracks. Now, models have been in pretty good agreement on the track here since the system formed earlier today. There's been a little bit of a shift westward here in the short term, but then bending right back to where we were before. So keying in here on either the Forgotten Coast or the Nature Coast and into the Big Bend area. And I do think this is a pretty good forecast. It gets it very close to Tallahassee. There's still a chance, though, depending on how this interacts with the Yucatan and timing of the next trough, that this could still shift. Despite the agreement, despite how there's very little run-to-run difference, doesn't mean it's going to land here. There's still a chance this could go east or even west of this predicted path. So beware of those potential adjustments here. Now, the official track here on Zoom Earth takes this center very close to Cancun. Now a hurricane warning is posted as the system will be strengthening and could become a hurricane as it is scraping the coastline. And this is really the critical next 12 to 24 hours that may determine the fate of this storm. If it does, in fact, go over the Yucatan, that's really bad for them, but better for Florida. It's going to absorb some of the intensification, at least I think. But if it stays over on this eastern side of the cone, as I'd mentioned a little while ago, that's better for Cancun, but potentially worse farther up in Florida, depending on how this plays out here. And as the system continues to organize, we're going to see some flipping and flopping here of the models. We've seen a lot of that today. I'm going to walk you through that. Arrival times have not really changed. We're going to see hurricane conditions spreading inland on Thursday into the Big Bend area, but tropical storm force winds affecting a large portion of Florida as soon as Wednesday morning in the Keys, Wednesday evening in Southwest Florida, Wednesday night in Central Florida, and Thursday morning into Northern Florida. And notice how quickly this system is advancing Thursday night all the way up into South Carolina and Georgia. We could even see some stronger winds on the coastal side of Northeast Florida, as well as coastal Georgia, and even all the way up to places like Beaufort, Bluffton, Hilton Head, Charleston, and even maybe close to Myrtle Beach. Could get pretty windy here on Thursday evening. Storm surge watches are in effect here. This may be updated, but all the way from Apalachicola all the way down here, about 400 or so miles of coast to the Everglades in Monroe County. Peak surge forecast continues to be extremely high nearer to the east of where the storm will come on shore, 10 to 15 feet for the Apalachee Bay, all the way down through Steinhatchee, all the way to Chassahowitzka. I hope I said that right. And 5 to 8 feet into Tampa Bay, both parts of the bay here, which includes portions of Tampa that could be inundated by this storm surge. A very big storm, as I mentioned, by the time it gets to this latitude, it is going to spread that water very quickly inland, even into this area, hence the storm surge watch. Even if you're in Southwest Florida, Bonita Beach, Fort Myers, coastal sections, Sanibel, you're going to have some storm surge flooding, unfortunately. I know that's what you don't want to hear. So here's an overall look of the tropics. And again, we can see our storm is forming, growing in size now, and I'm going to zoom in on it in a minute. We do have a wave moving towards the islands that is flared up, but not expected to develop. We have a front that's cleared Bermuda, much better weather there. That is going to head to the northeast. And an area that we're watching for gradual development, it's probably going to go up in this direction here, could become Isaac, our next system. The wave behind it, some models are developing as well down the road here, so we do need to keep an eye on that as well. Here's a closer look at the Gulf and the Caribbean. We've got two storms that are still kind of fighting over the same space. This is the one that's going to take over Helene, and this is what's left of John. The center's inland, so it's no longer a tropical system, but the rain's not just going to magically evaporate either. Unfortunately, kind of a forgotten situation here with amazing amounts of rain around Oaxaca and around Guerrero and even Chiapas states here in southern Mexico. Acapulco getting a lot of rain here this evening. And unfortunately, that could be very deadly, as we know the terrain there is very rough. All right, here is what's going on with Helene. And you can see the center is still kind of broad, but beginning to consolidate. It's in a spot where it is going to grow, and we will see intensification. Winds are up to 50 miles per hour, and the pressure has been dropping lightly but steadily here through the afternoon down to 995. There are multiple vortices. There was one down in here earlier that seems to be going away and a new one taking over. So it is still not quite fully stacked yet, not in a position to form a core quickly, but it is getting into that direction. And as it gets closer to the Yucatan here tonight, up in this area, it's got a pretty good shot of becoming a hurricane. Now, the problem is if it ends up farther west and that center goes over this area, that's going to disturb that intensification phase somewhat. If it rides the coast, it may still strengthen, but ideally for it to strengthen faster, it needs to come up into here. And the lane is open where it could go anywhere from here to here at this point. The models have shifted west during the day here, but they still agree that this is going to be coming in as a strengthening system. Here's the water vapor image, and you can see there is outflow from John moving into this direction. That's actually adding moisture back to the dry air that was starting to wrap in earlier around Belize. There's a weakening upper level low or trough here off the Yucatan that is retreating and moving away. So there's a little bit of wind shear, a little bit of dry air still on the western side, but you can see here over the last few frames that Helene does not seem to care about that adversity. She is beginning to grow in size and intensity, and this is a precursor to what should be a pretty quickly developing storm by tonight and tomorrow. Here's the radar from the Caymans. We're in a bit of a break right now across Grand Cayman, but the sister islands are now getting another band of very heavy rain. Tropical storm conditions staying pretty much west of you in the Caymans, but the rain is not going away, and it shouldn't either tonight or tomorrow. All right, let's take a look at some of the ingredients that are going to go into this intensification. Again, I realize that the Hurricane Center is going Category 3. I personally think it's stronger and that they're going to be underdone on this, and I'm going to go over why that is. But you can see over the next 48 hours, wind shear is expected to be very low. At the same time, water temperatures are going to be very warm, and relative humidity is going to be significant until we get close to the northern Gulf Coast when it starts getting a little bit drier. Heat content is significantly high here. That's allowing the storm to take over all of the Western Caribbean right now. It comes down just a touch and then picks up again as it moves into this area. So when you've got all four of these things, you've got a favorable spot for this storm to overachieve. And that is what continues to concern me. If you take a look here at the wind shear tendency, you'll see it has dropped off. Wind shear is lowered today. It's backed off. Wind shear is low across much of the central and eastern Gulf. See these blue colors? That indicates favorable weather aloft here for this system to grow. Not all wind shear is bad necessarily. I want to bring you guys up to this case study of Hurricane Michael. Now, this system is going a little farther to the east in the longer term, but Michael was only expected to be a minimal hurricane when it moved in and over similarly warm waters. But what happened was it got up to Category 4, and they posthumously upgraded it to Category 5. The pressure was 919 millibars. The reason why the storm intensified so quickly, yes, it was in warm waters. The waters we have now are even warmer, believe it or not. But also the upper level trough that steered that storm northwest just before landfall actually produced a favorable amount of what we call divergence or diffluence. What this does is it allows our storm to ventilate and grow, giving it favorable outflow, giving it a chance to grow. This, in turn, feeds things back into the storms, allowing them to deepen and intensify around the center. And as a result, that storm way overachieved. It was supposed to be a low-end Category 1 storm 2 days before it hit, ended up hitting as a Category 5. Now, models are jumping on this one, intensifying. They do go back and forth between Category 2, 3, 4, and 5, but they are showing intensification. But I want you to take a look at this here. This is the upper level setup on the Icon model, and here's what you see. We've got a strong trough dropping down here, and we have strong wind flow from southwest to northeast here. This is a jet streak, but then we also have some spreading of that wind. This is a perfect example of diffluence or divergence when these winds aloft start to expand out. And what this is going to allow our storm to do is as it moves into this region, it is going to have a chance to grow significantly. This is very favorable for outflow. If you take a look here at the Icon model, you can see it actually catches the tail end of this jet streak. So as a result, while there is increasing wind shear as this trough moves in, the storm is going to get sheared to the point where it actually grows on the northern and eastern side. We saw that with Francine, but Francine didn't have as much time to develop. But Francine even strengthened with that strong wind shear. The real nasty wind shear for this storm is still back in here tomorrow night. It is not yet getting to the storm. By the time it gets here, our storm is going to be making landfall. It just may be too little too late. Doesn't mean the storm may not max out and then weaken a little bit before it hits, but it's just not going to be able to stop it from being a major hurricane, in my opinion. Now, this trough does lift away, this upper level low lifts away, and we see the southwest flow increasing Thursday night. And at that point, I think we're going to see things changing. The storm's going to look sheared. It's going to stop strengthening. But there's no guarantee that that's actually going to happen in time for this storm before it hits. So just something to keep in mind here. Here's what the Michael forecast was originally. Remember, it was actually supposed to hit the Yucatan. And, oh, goodness, sorry about that. And you can see here it managed to form a little bit farther offshore and then found its way into the channel and expected to be a hurricane. But as it came through the western tip of Cuba and then over the same place this storm is going to be here after a day after it became a tropical storm, you can see that it was just all systems go at that point. So again, we've seen this happen before. There's no reason to believe that it can't happen here, but this is not a forecast that's going to be just so simple where we know exactly what's going to happen and when. It's going to change some more as this system interacts with all kinds of different processes. Very warm water in place here over where it's going to go. Very high ocean heat content. You can see that right here. And a pretty set track at this point. There's less than 100 miles spread between Port St. Joe and Keaton Beach, with the center here on the western Apalachee Bay here. Intensity forecast, this has shifted. And I do think that there's a bit of a knee-jerk reaction because models are now making this, it's not like it's weaker than it was supposed to be at this point, but they're making it interact more with the Yucatan than they were at the last run. That doesn't mean it's not going to go back in the other direction. I've seen forecasts where 48 hours out, they were going with Category 2. It ended up being a 4 or 5. So I'm still holding on to my Category 4, but at this point, the models have backed off a little bit. If you take a look at the upper level pattern, you'll see the icon does not make landfall with this system. It actually puts it in a favorable spot to strengthen. It's a little right of some of the other models, but still going in that general area of the Big Bend, and then doing the Fujiwara dance here with the upper level low. That's the icon. Now the HWRF model, as you can see here, is on this kick where it's taking the storm as a hurricane into Cancun overnight tonight, just hugging the coast, and then there's a little dry air that gets in here because of that interaction with the Yucatan. It does lose that dry air, but it is going to potentially not be as strong as what earlier models had said. It's still a strengthening storm. This is a Category 4 as it comes in to the Apalachee Bay here Thursday night around 7, 8, 9 o'clock. 9:42 is a strong storm, but the model run before was totally different. You can see it was 9:28. The model run before that, sorry for my slowness here, 9:24, but same time yesterday, 9:47. The time before that, 9:30. So this model is still going back and forth. I'm not going to show you the other tropical models, but they're all kind of in the same boat, Category 3, maybe low end Category 4. But they're going back and forth on this, and they're still struggling with which low pressure area is actually going to take over, because there are still multiple little circulations here as this system organizes. And if it doesn't go this far west, it is going to be a lot deeper, and it's not going to have the dry air getting into it, and it should be a much stronger system than this. So something to watch here. Here's the icon model, which is to the right of the other models, but deepens it to a strong Category 3 or low-end Category 4. And then you'll see it still has intense winds on the coast, maybe hurricane force gusts for coastal Georgia, northeast Florida, and even parts of South Carolina, and tropical storm conditions advancing into North Georgia. The other models are west of this and have more of Atlanta and Macon getting hit. This model is a little farther east, closer to Augusta and Greenville, South Carolina. Here's the halves model real quick. And again, it's quite a bit different than what it was here in the last run. Take a look at this. The last run, the halves model had this going right through and strengthening as a result, avoiding the land. The latest run here has too much interaction with the Yucatan, and as a result, it's quite a bit weaker coming out the gate. In fact, it doesn't get to major hurricane strength. It's incredible because this model a little while ago was going high-end Category 4, and yesterday was going Category 5, and today it's saying, oh, it's only going to be a Category 2. I don't trust it, because I think it's knee-jerk reacting here to which low takes over, and it's making landfall in the Yucatan. But you know what? I cannot never say that with a lot of confidence until this clears the Yucatan. I could be totally wrong, and I will be the first person here to admit that to you guys. But this is what we're stacked up against. Does the low take it into the Yucatan, or does it clear and stay right over the middle of the Yucatan channel? Because the difference could be 2 categories in intensity here. Anyway, the NAM model, oh boy. By the way, don't use the NAM to make a tropical forecast. It is in the 880s, 884. The reason why is it's not seeing what's going on in the Caribbean. That's out of range. You can see that here. So don't trust it, but I would trust the fact that it's going to be a growing storm here. And the satellite image here is not all that far off. It may not look quite like this, but you can see how the size grows here. And a lot of that has to do with how it interacts with the jet stream. So let's take a look at wind forecasting here. You can see the earlier GFS brings strong winds into the eastern part of the Big Bend, maybe to Tampa, all the way up into eastern Georgia, even at the coast here, strong winds. This could still shift to the west. So don't feel like Tallahassee that you may miss out on this. If it shifts west, you very well could be in on that, which would be better for Tampa. Here's a look at what it's showing in Georgia and South Carolina. Again, very strong winds, and this is shifted to the right a bit from earlier runs. And in North Carolina, significant winds up into the mountains here on Friday as well. This could cause widespread wind damage in the mountains of North Carolina. Rain is the other thing we're concerned with. It is a quick-moving storm, so we're not going to see feet of rain like we saw in North Carolina last Monday, but we are going to see a lot of rain near the track of this storm, 3 to 6 inches plus, and potentially up to a foot. And to me, the greater concern is what happens when this moisture gets rung up into the upslopes of the mountains here. You see on this map here, 13-inch potential in parts of western North Carolina, and I'm thinking about Pisgah Forest being the spot that could get the worst. So right here, Rabun County in Georgia, parts of Pickens and And Greenville and Spartanburg counties, the higher elevations, and you know what you know there, or you know about those areas if you live there, just have some significant rain potential here in the coming days, which would cause flooding. Where we really need the rain, we're not going to see a ton of it, but we are going to see a few inches in Kentucky, West Virginia, and Ohio, just not a big flood event at this point. And the other thing I wanted to bring up with you guys here too is the wind in the mountains. This is 900 millibars, about 3,000 to 4,000 feet up. And you can see wind gusts of 80 knots or more showing up here up against the mountains. If this is a little farther west, this could produce the kind of winds that cause damage in the mountains and take down a lot of those pretty leaves that we're going to expect to see with the peak of fall foliage a few weeks away. We do have a tornado threat increasing tomorrow afternoon in Central Florida, tomorrow night in Northern Florida, all the way up overnight into South Carolina. Real quick, I'll show you the NAM model. You can see not a huge tornado outbreak for the time being, but there may be a couple tornadoes on Thursday. The better chance will be late Thursday afternoon around Orlando and all the way up to about Lake City and Okefenokee Swamp. And then at night, that chance does start to climb here in South Georgia. I think overnight it ends up even sneaking up into the low country of South Carolina. So that's it on this storm. I'll have more tomorrow. A quick look at the rest of the Atlantic. We're not going to see development from this wave moving into the islands, but it will get wet. The next system is not looking great, but is still hanging on. The one after it might have a better chance of developing if you believe the GFS. You can see here, this system gains latitude. This is probably Isaac and then may diminish by next Monday. The next one may have a chance of coming back here. I don't know if I buy this track towards the islands yet. That's way far out, but it has been developing this system, but we're not going to put a lot of weight in what we see beyond 9 or 10 days. And in the Pacific, a catastrophe here in Mexico, John, is a remnant low. It hit as a Category 3 hurricane overnight, and incredible amounts of rain, as you can see here on the south coast of Mexico and inland as well. With the remnant moisture just hanging around, some of that may sneak into the southern Gulf here next week, but I don't think it'll redevelop. On the viz, you can see here, even though the storm has pretty much lowered to below depression strength, it is continuing to rain. And there's the threat for 30 or more inches of rain locally here from this storm across the south coast of Mexico. I hope you all have a great night. I will continue to keep you guys posted. I am sticking with my guns on my forecast, but if I feel the need to back off, I am happy to do that. I'm happy to be humbled by the weather. This is not an easy science to predict. The weather has never been easy. I've done this for over 20 years, but I do appreciate you guys trusting me and my expertise. I'm just one of many, and I wanted you all to know that. But if you did enjoy this video and want to see more, please consider coming back and becoming a subscriber of mine. And finally, I want to give all the credit, all the honor and glory to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. God has been good to me, and I know he's been good to you despite everything that we see here in the world. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. That's Psalm 23. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. I am praying for the comfort for many of you who are going through this stressful time, prepping for this storm. But I do know that the Lord is good, and this is an opportunity for all of us to come together in his name, to serve each other, to take care of one another, and to operate in grace, much like God has operated in grace for all of us, as all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. If you do have a prayer request, please list it in the comments, and I will spend time in prayer for you. Hope you all have a blessed night. I'll catch up with you tomorrow. Take care.